Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we'll be doing an unboxing and review video for the 1/6 scale Mighty Morphin Power Rangers by Threezero. This will be one big review covering all 5 of the core Rangers, plus everyone's favorite, the Green Ranger. In the wake of Godzilla's release in 1954, the special effects genre, known as tokusatsu, started to gain momentum in Japan. In the decades that followed, this evolved into a subgenre in television, with a primary focus on masked superheroes battling rubber suit monsters. Notable franchises emerged from this era that are still running today include Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and last but not least, Super Sentai, which was brought over to the West as Power Rangers in the 90s. Based on the 16th season of Super Sentai known as Zyuranger, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers borrowed stock footages of action scenes from its Japanese counterpart, while the story is completely rewritten to fit the sitcom format. It was pure genius. It was teenage comedy and romance, mixed with superhero martial arts and giant combiner robots, and this sensory overload was a breakout success. Threezero released this set in 2021, which marks the few rare occasions where 6-scale figures from a tokusatsu franchise were produced by a company outside of Japan. The packaging is stylish and efficient. The whole thing unravels like a book, revealing that all 6 Rangers are held in just 2 trays. Kicking things off with the Red and Green Rangers, the sculpting, color, and glossy finish on these helmets are simply stunning. The silver fangs on the visors and the ridge atop the Green Ranger's helmet did not go amiss. Though if I'm being super picky, the gold lining around the red jewel on the Green Ranger's helmet is missing. I'm not sure if this was changed in later seasons, but this was definitely there when he was first introduced. Their power morphers look amazing too. The sculpting on the coin and text is very clear, and Threezero did not forget that the Green Ranger had a gold morpher. The dragon shield is an interesting one. The details in the center and the ridges on the shoulders are all looking very good, but the general shapes seem to follow the awful flimsy version as seen in the reshoots, as it spans flat out from the shoulder instead of sloping down, leaving a pretty big gap between the shoulder and the tip of the shield, whereas the original version is much more tapered and is overall more compact. Again, this is just me being nitpicky, because what we have definitely looks the part. There's no question that this is the dragon shield. Other than that, the armbands and gold linings around the gauntlets and boots, which are exclusive to the Green Ranger, are looking fabulous here. Moving on to the Black and Blue Rangers, their helmets exhibit the same quality sculpting and finish that we've seen thus far. Threezero is also able to capture the rather subtle variations between the different sculpting on the mouthplates. The textured ears on the Mastodon is a personal favorite of mine. The power coins and the morphers are very recognizable as well. It's like Threezero is just flexing their attention to details at this point. And finally, for the Yellow and Pink Rangers, the helmets are every bit just as spectacular as the others, with the Pink Ranger's unique two-tone design masterfully brought into the scale, and the subtle difference between the mouthplates can once again be observed here. And this level of detail is once again extended all the way to the power morphers, though I do find the pterodactyl coin a little hard to make out, but that's due to the design being hard to see at this scale rather than the sculpting. As some of you might already know, the power of the Yellow Ranger was held by a boy named Boy in the Japanese version. This was changed to a girl named Trini in the Western release, despite all the stock footages showing a Ranger with a distinctly male contour. But since Power Rangers is unequivocally the Western version, Threezero had chosen to portray the Yellow Ranger with a female physique, and I, for one, am all for it. As for the costumes, the base fabric is bright, vibrant, flexible, and has that screen-accurate metallic sheen. The weave of the fabric might look a little coarse here under the scrutiny of the harsh lighting and camera lens, but the costume overall looks great in hand. One thing I'd recommend when you get these out of the box is to realign these seams to face towards the body. It's less strain on the fabric and will generally improve the physique. The diamond patterns on the chest and back are supposed to be made of the same material as the rest of the suit, but as you can see from where the neck meets the torso, the transition leaves behind a pretty gnarly seam. Given the precision required to replicate this pattern at this scale, while trying to minimize the seams would be an expensive QC nightmare. So Threezero opted to just cut the pattern from a thinner material and sew it directly over the fabric, which is why the diamond patterns have this glossy finish instead of the metallic sheen. I think it's a good trade-off to keep the figures affordable, but it's not without pitfalls. For instance, there are some stains on both the underarms on my Red Ranger, and there's already some signs of wear on my pink ranger, so hopefully they'll hold up over time. The sculpting and pattern on these gauntlets look great, but the cuffs don't have the screen-accurate straight cuts, which I think is a strange design choice, because this requires you to wedge the hands in place, and turning the hands means turning the gauntlet as well. The belts are not removable, but they do have a little wiggle room to cope with the articulations. They're all complete with a holster for the blade blaster. The holster for the Green Ranger is specifically for the dragon dagger. And then there are the seams on the crotch, which are screen accurate to the anatomy of the actual suits. The seams are barely noticeable on the life-size version, but they don't scale down too well, so I do find them a little distracting. I am glad that Threezero made an effort to keep the suit as accurate as possible, but in this case, I wouldn't mind if they skipped this detail. I love these split-cut boots though. Unlike the cuffs on the gauntlets, the feet can wedge into the boots for better stability while maintaining a great degree of articulation. Speaking of which, the articulations don't stray too far from the usual 6-scale figure offerings. To help lower manufacturing costs, all the male rangers share one body type, and likewise for the female rangers, so there's no height difference between rangers of the same sex. Regardless, the bodies underneath do provide the adequate physique required by every ranger, but the difference in range of motions between male and female rangers are worth noting. While the neck joints are fairly traditional, the male rangers have a much greater degree of up and down motion over the female rangers, who have next to nothing in this category. Then in turn, the female rangers have much better shoulder articulations, as they can swing their arms out much farther, and takes way less effort to raise them straight up. It's like some weird competition because the male rangers have almost a full bend on their elbows, while the females can barely get a 90-degree bend. But from here on, the articulations are the same for everyone. Usual stuff like the ab crunch, pelvis, bicep and thigh swivels, and the ratchet knee are all very stellar. Oh, and there are a ton of hand parts. The main takeaway here is that, other than the size difference between the male and female wrist pegs, every ranger has a set of clenched, relaxed, and gripping hands, plus 1 or 2 unique ones from each ranger, for specific poses or use with their respective weapons. And finally, the Power Rangers aren't complete without their signature weapons. First is the Blade Blaster. The sculpting and text on this weapon is clear and legible. It even has the same transformation sequence for its blade form and blaster form. There are one of these for each of the core 5 rangers. Then we have the Power Sword. The sculpting on the hilt and the blade etchings are simply gorgeous, and it complements Jason's Red Ranger very nicely. Next is the Power Axe. The sculpting here is brilliant, and it's got some of that signature Threezero weathering on both sides. Our boy Zack looks really good with this. The pair of Power Lance is extendable. Billy can either wield this separately, or together as one long staff, but do be careful to pull them apart by the silver tips, otherwise you'll break it like I did by pulling from the blue handles. Next we have a pair of Power Daggers. Strangely, the weathering patterns are exactly the same on both, but it hardly matters as Trini looks like an absolute boss with these. And finally we have the Power Bow. The text here reads Jew Ranger, which is an artifact from the Japanese stock footages, but it also means this thing is accurate down to the last detail, such as the pterodactyl logo and the stretchy bowstring. The arrow is a little weathered on both tips. There's even a notch in the fletching for fitting the string, so I just couldn't resist firing this thing. But
don't try it!
As you might risk damaging the arrow. Besides, Kimberly looks phenomenal with this set in hand. And with all the core weapons gathered, we can combine them to make the Power Blaster. What's really cool is that the Power Bow has built-in magnets for attaching the Power Lances and Daggers, though the magnetic grip isn't very strong, and it's a pain in the butt to line up all the Rangers for this pose. This setup will look amazing on your shelf when it's done. And finally, the Dragon Dagger is faithfully reproduced here, with the flute as the blade fuller, the surrounding green scaly texture, flute keys on the handle, and the enclosure pipes. Even the curves on the mouthpiece are discernible. And as if that wasn't already enough, we also have the Sword of Darkness. The curves, slots, and etchings are just too darn beautiful. It's even got an actual red tassel at the end of the hilt. With these 2 weapons in hand, Tommy looks just as imposing as he always did in the show. With all that said though, I do want to note that this set does not come with any display stands, which I'm guessing is an effort for keeping the cost down. So you'll have to resort to your own display stands for those dynamic poses. For the side-by-side comparison, here we have the Avengers Endgame Iron Man by Hot Toys. As the Rangers themselves are pretty sizable, they look pretty good standing next to Iron Man. But for me personally, a more meaningful comparison would be pitting a Ranger against other icons of the tokusatsu genre. So here we have the original Ultraman Type C and the original Kamen Rider Ichigo by Medicom. I am super excited to finally have a representation of the Super Sentai franchise standing next to these time-honored characters. So there you have it, the 1/6 scale Mighty Morphin Power Rangers by Threezero. I know I might have come across as a little nitpicky in this review, but the truth is I really love this release. I wanted to be fair because this is a rather pricey purchase, but even with some minor inconsistencies, I am more than happy with the final product. In fact, I had so much fun posing these that I felt like a 90s kid all over again, and I hope you'll find the same. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.